So, Quantum Leap seems to be flying high at the moment. We've had a good run of episodes. Does episode 17, Friendly Skies, keep us up there? Or does this episode come crashing down to the ground? Let's find out in my latest episode review. Welcome back to the channel, everyone, and welcome to this here, my latest episode review for Quantum Leap. Episode 17, Friendly Skies. One episode left after this, and then that is this season complete. Wow, who would have thought it? And well done to everyone who's sticking with the show. Fantastic. So this episode here, obviously a lot happened in that last episode. A lot happened with Martinez, with Ben getting stabbed by Martinez, almost dying at the end, it seemed. Obviously he didn't. Ziggy being a corrupt computer, it would seem, and all this sort of thing. So how does this episode go? Okay, let's get Ziggy out of the equation first, right? Because last week was a bit of a red herring in a sense that it made out that Ziggy was bad, Ziggy was corrupt and all this sort of a thing. But that's not the case. It's just more a case of if the same Ziggy is being utilised in the future for Martinez to leap, then Ziggy's got all the information in it about all the previous leaps and what has happened. And this is how Martinez seems to know where Ben is and all this sort of a thing. It's nothing more than that. So all that stuff with Ziggy's lights turning red and all this sort of a thing at the end, pretty much done for dramatic effect, nothing more. But that was a nice sort of, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it, more than anything else, that all this information's stored. Anyway, this episode, yes, it's an aeroplane hijack episode, and who doesn't like things like Air Force One, Passenger 57, what's the one with Steven Seagal and Kurt Russell, Executive Decision? Who doesn't like that sort of a story? They're compelling, they're fun, they're action-packed. Does this do anything different with it? So anyway, this episode here, we find that Ben has leapt into the body of Lois Mitchell, who comes from Chicago. It's August the 5th, 1971, and she works on board this aeroplane, TJ349, which is an aeroplane flying from London to New York, a new model of 747 Transglobal Airlines. But this Boeing 747, history records that this airplane crashed into the Atlantic. All 366 bodies on board perished. That's how history records it, but no one knows how or why the events revolved around it. And Ben is on board this plane, and he's got an hour until this occurs. Now, interestingly enough, in the future, they say, Ernie Hudson's character, Magic, says we've only got an hour to find this out. So they're working in real time, much like what Ben is. I've never really considered that before for Quantum Leap. Do they work in real time? Why do they have to work in real time? Ben's the one in the past, but they're running it in real time as well. Okay, fair enough. But I guess that's the way it's been. I've just never really thought about it. Anyway, on board this flight, we've got other characters. We're introduced to the captain. We're introduced to this young lad called Corey, who's on board with this babysitter who's an ex-police officer. Her name is Leslie. Corey happens to be the son of the owner of the airlines, and he goes on these planes a lot, and he's known by the staff and all this sort of a stuff. Anyway, the pilot and the other fella in the cockpit, not the co-pilot, the geezer on the radio, they get poisoned by some coffee, and Ben has to figure out who done the poisoning and all this sort of thing. And he thinks it's this other stewardess. Obviously, did I say Ben's a stewardess? He's a stewardess, if I didn't say it. He thinks that it might be her because she was going to deliver the coffee. But it turns out that the actual hijackers are the co-pilot himself, Leslie, this babysitter for the young boy, and they have to rescue the flight. And it does play into the sort of cliches of these airplane disaster films where the plane eventually has to be landed by someone, in this case Ben, who's got no knowledge of how to land a plane or anything like that, and they have to be talked through it. And in this scene they managed to bring Ian into the fold. He gets his opportunity to now be the hologram. So they're getting through everyone one a bit at a time as to who the hologram is and all this sort of thing. You know, obviously Jen is her name, the security person in Quantum Leap. She got the opportunity a couple of weeks ago. And they're all proving to be better holograms than Addison, in my opinion. Do you find that as well? But there we go. So this episode here, it didn't crash and burn at all. This was an enjoyable episode. It was. Quantum Leap has started taking off. No pun intended. It's becoming stronger and stronger. There's been, last week's episode was stronger than this episode, but we've had a good run of episodes over the past few weeks. Strong episodes, and the show has sort of found its footing and it's progressing really well. So I do feel unfortunate for those people that have jumped off. As comparisons go to the original Quantum Leap, it is still something completely different. You shouldn't be comparing it. That's a completely different show. No, it's the same show, but what I mean is don't compare it. Just take this as its own thing. It's a reimagining come sequel to that, and it works wonderfully. The characters have come into their own. All of them are growing and progressing, and we've got one episode left, and it is such a shame. So we've got another strong episode here in this one. Thematically, it's strong. It goes into, talk about the IRA and that sort of a thing, but it doesn't turn out that they're IRA or anything like that. These are people doing it for a bit of finances who are a bit disgruntled because they're working for the geezer who owns this airline. They feel they're being taken advantage of. But it does delve into that sort of a thing, and the terrorist side of it, it's nice to see stories like that again. I'm sure stories like that would have been shied away from 20 years ago for obvious reasons and things like that. It was a strong episode. It was an interesting episode. It had that hour, so you're counting down to a point again. It gives you that sort of, we've got to get this resolved by the time we hit this marker, because at this point this plane goes down. So time's against them as well in the narrative of the story. So a wonderful episode. And I'm looking forward to next week, because obviously we had the leap at the end. We come to find out where Ben has leapt, and he's leapt into the future. Wonderful. This Quantum Leap is opening itself up. It's breaking the rules of the original Quantum Leap. It is, but that show done it a couple of times. Why can't this show do it? And why can't this show indulge in that sort of a stuff if it can do it dramatically, if it can do it to make sense in the narrative and all this sort of a thing? Why not? So now it's your turn. How desperate are you to see next week's one? Are you as desperate as me? Are you going to be sad when this goes and we got to wait for season 2? Because obviously this is where Ben's been leaping to, apparently. So he's got one leap left in him or something, or when he gets to where he's going. So how are they going to continue it after that? Theories down below, let me know, and let me know your thoughts on this episode, obviously. And yes, let's have a wonderful, fantastic conversation about it down below. Let's do it, people. And until next week, I'll be there, you'll be there. Season finale. Let's get to it.